Okay, again, good morning. I'm going to turn it over to today's speaker, Casey Olson from NC State's Industry Expansion Solutions. Casey, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to start off by saying thank you all for joining this morning. I appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to be here with us. Um, so hopefully you're here because you're interested in learning about 3D virtual tours. So before I get started, I'll quickly introduce myself. So I graduated from NC State with a degree in industrial and systems engineering in 2021. I worked in industry as a process engineer following graduation at a manufacturing plant that made satellite dishes and brackets. So part of why this 3D virtual tour technology really excites me is because I led so many process improvement projects that involved reconfiguring assembly lines or storage locations, or even the layout of a 100,000 square foot warehouse. And so there was a lot of trips with a measuring tape and a piece of paper and going back to my AutoCAD, trying to, get the layout of the floor where I got distracted by people along the way. My priorities changed, and I spent a lot of time, working on projects where I could have benefited greatly from having a digital twin. So I've worked at Industry Expansion Solutions for the last 2 years, and I get to do lean trainings and projects with companies all across the great state of North Carolina. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm going to be presenting for the first half of this presentations, and then as you just heard, we'll have Q&A at the end. So I'm going to start off with a poll. If I could get a kind of just get a intel on how interested you guys are on 3D virtual tours. So 1 being, not that interested, 5 being very interested in using it, and maybe like in the middle would be you're not quite sure. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like I don't have to do too much to win you guys over, but hopefully by the end of this, you'll have a little bit more knowledge on, how you might be able to use a virtual twin or a virtual tour and see if those results change between now and the end of today. Okay. So for those of you that might be unfamiliar with industry expansion solutions, we can help you identify resources and tools and customized programs to increase your organization's productivity, efficiency, quality, and profit. So if you need training, we help all industries in all counties of North Carolina, whether you're a small to medium-sized manufacturer or you're a government agency or anything in between, we're here to help. So today we're going to be covering, what a 3D virtual tour is, and then how do you create a 3D virtual tour? How long does it take, and roughly how much does it cost, and what the benefits and uses of it are. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, what is a 3D virtual tour, and how does it work? So a 3D virtual tour allows you to explore digital and interactive representations of a physical space. So you can really think of it as a digital copy of your physical space. So it works by stitching together panoramic images or LiDAR by scanning to give you an interactive map. So LiDAR, if you don't know, stands for light detection and ranging, which basically means that lasers are being sent out to give measure distances. So 3D virtual tours can be used for virtual reality if you wanted to use VR, but I don't know that that's the most useful in the workplace, but Meta definitely thinks it is. So I'm going to kind of show you examples because I think the best way to learn what a 3D virtual tour is just by looking at it. And at the end of the presentation, I will pull up an actual tour and show you as well. But here you can kind of see a stitch or a doll version of a tour. So it's a 3D representation, and these are all the scans that are compiled into one file. So here's an example of what that finished product could look like when you're actually in person mode looking at it. This is like basically a picture that you can move around in. So you can click between points on a scan and you can see the room's layout. So in this example, it's giving you the measurements for each wall of the layout. It can also give you a bird's eye view of your layout. So here you can see that it's a little bit more of a complex shape, and there's a lot of details that can be captured in a short amount of time, which we'll go over roughly how long it takes for different size spaces. But in this example, this was scanned in less than an hour. So if you can see all the cutouts in the wall, how long that would take to go through with the measuring tape and a piece of paper and try and get accurate. This is, I think, a really great example of being able to get a complex layout in a short amount of time. I'll also point out here that sometimes you've got spaces that you don't necessarily want visible from a camera. So if you've got a bunch of cubicles, in this instance, we have a bunch of cubicles. We didn't necessarily tell people that they needed to clean off their desk or hide anything. So I didn't go into their cubicle areas and scan all of their stuff. So that's why it's black, is if it's something that the camera didn't pick up, it's black. Or if there's bathrooms or closet spaces, you can still get a feel for how much space it's taking up in a layout without necessarily scanning it. Okay. So for machinery, you can have lots of scan points. So depending on the detail that you want of an area, you just take more scans. So those white dots on the floor here, these white circles, those are the scan points. And you can move within your scan anywhere, or within your tour anywhere, there's a scan point. So for machines, you're going to want a lot of details, and you'll be able to capture every, pretty much every angle of a machinery so that you can go and reference that virtually. And another thing that this is really useful for is being able to quickly measure things. So if you're sitting at your desk and you want to know how tall a table is, or you're trying to reconfigure, like some of the projects I was talking about, trying to reconfigure an area and you need to know how tall a machine is, it's a lot easier to use a digital twin and scan or measure from point to point rather than getting vertical heights of a machine. That can be pretty challenging. So this is a helpful tool that you can do post scan once you have the twin. So let's say you wanted to create your own 3D virtual tour. So you'll need a couple of things. You'll need, for one, your camera, right? And a software to compile all of the scans. So you'll be paying for a camera and software. So there's kind of 4 major steps to creating a 3D virtual tour. One, the first step is capturing those image and scanning the space. So you can roughly do that about an hour for every 15,000 square feet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then processing and stitching the scans and putting them all together so that you can actually get the final product. That takes a couple of days, 1 to 2 days, depending on the software that you're using. And then enhancing your tour, so you can make it as interactive as you would like. So if you want to label every machine in your factory so that you have a name and a visual, so when you're training people on what machines what, you could list everything. If you wanted to do a safety tour and have all the fire extinguishers labeled on your plant, you could do that as well. So there's a lot of details to add. You can hide spaces, you can show spaces. You can do a lot of different edits, and depending on how much you want to edit it, that could take, maybe a couple hours to even a couple of days if you want to really put a lot of details into it. And then the 4th step is publishing it and integrating it into your website or platform. And that's really going to depend on what your use is for the digital twin or the 3D virtual tour. Because you might not necessarily want it to be public, but that is up to you. So timing is going to depend on a couple of different factors. The first factor is going to be your density of equipment. If you've got a lot of equipment and you want really dense, or you want a lot of details about it, you're going to take more scan points, so it's going to take more time to scan. Also your complexity of a space. So if you're in a square room, it's going to be a bit easier. You won't necessarily need to capture as many details as you would if you're in a maybe an older building where the floor is not necessarily level, or you've got a lot of, interesting dimensions going on. We might need more scan points. And then again, your desired detail of scan. So that kind of goes back to density of equipment as well. But if you just have an area you want way more details of, or you would know that when you have your digital twin that you want to go and you want to see more spaces or be able to walk around essentially virtually in more places, then that's going to take up a little bit more time when it comes to scanning. But I think a good estimate is about an hour for every 15 to 20,000 square feet. So if you have an empty warehouse, it's going to be much quicker than if you're in a building with lots of doors and stairs and equipment. So cost wise, you're going to want to consider how much you have for the equipment and software, or if it makes sense to hire someone like Industry Expansion Solutions to come out and do the scan for you. Because if you're only going to use the camera once, then you probably don't need your own camera. And if you are unsure what would make sense for you, I am happy to discuss it with you after the presentation. So the camera itself is really, it's depending on quality, because you could, if you were just scanning a single room, in theory, you could take a tripod and your phone and an app and be able to, scan the room with just like $100 accessory. But if you want detailed quality, dimension accuracy, and a larger space, it can get upwards of 10 grand. So it likely makes sense to hire somebody like Industry Expansion Solutions to come in and do the scan for you. Okay, so hopefully you're thinking, this is a cool technology, but how exactly am I going to use it in my workplace? So hopefully this will answer some of those questions. So a lot of manufacturers might have, an outdated CAD file or some sort of ERP system that tracks your assets. But if, this could be the closest representation of how a space actually is. So if a tornado did come through your facility and you needed to rebuild it, this would be an incredibly valuable tool. So you could also, like an added benefit, even if it's not your main purpose, is insurance documentation. Another benefit is it can be used to improve your facility layouts. So traditionally, when we're walking around with measuring tape, or maybe a wheel and a piece of paper trying to document all the important details, dimensionally accurate scan can really aid with the creation of a 2D CAD drawing. The technology is not quite at the point where we can scan and immediately turns it into a .dwg file, although that might be true in the future. You can still gather a lot of details this way. So, you save a lot of time not going back and forth to go back to a room and be like, where exactly is the door? Because you start out with kind of a basic shell when making a CAD drawing, and then you go back in and add dimension or add more detailed dimensions based off of your goal. Versus the scan is a lot quicker than walking around with a measuring tape and a piece of paper, and you can use it to help make that 2D CAD drawing. So the other thing is, one of the biggest differences between this digital twin versus a CAD drawing is that you don't have the ability to move objects around. But if, let's say, you want to quickly assess if you wanted to redo a layout of a room, you do have the option to defurnish your space, essentially, making it like a blank slate. And you have a bird's eye view. So you could print out a couple of copies and paper doll it, because they're the same dimensional, as long as you're printing it out on the same scale. You'll be able to, cut out different equipment and kind of move it around your space. And that could be a quick option, a quick, cheap option for moving around layouts. And What this picture is actually showing is that you can measure travel distance with a digital twin. So in this picture, if I was going to the office, if I was in this office here on the left, and I wanted to go to this office here on the right and track how far I'm walking, you can very quickly add a measurement and figure out how far somebody is walking from place to place. So that could be really helpful when it comes to making like a spaghetti diagram or just tracking the flow and layout of how far you're traveling. Another benefit is that you can reduce your travel time. So let's say you had multiple facilities, and this would be an extremely helpful tool. So if you're on a Zoom call and you're trying to talk about a specific area, you're able to pull it up and show what it actually looks like. So think about how much time and money you can spend not traveling to things if you were able to pull it up and immediately show what an actual workspace area looks like. Another benefit of this is that you can use it for marketing. So if you have an area that you really want to show off, you know, maybe an awesome break room that you have that you want to attract new employees, you could show that. Or if your sales comes from Google searches and you want to boost your SEO, um, these links to the scans are very like popular websites and they're very helpful for that purpose. Um, but it really depends on, you know, what your need is or what you're looking for. So if it's attract new employees or attract new customers by showing off like awesome machinery that you have, marketing is really going to depend on what your needs are. You can also use it for training. So if you've got maybe a little bit more dangerous of a floor and you want to hire somebody and show them the lay of the land before you have them out on the floor, you can use this to train them on your facility. Or as I mentioned earlier, if you want to show all the fire extinguishers in your plant, you can, there's like so many different directions you can go training wise to get a good representation or get a good, use as a good tool for training, essentially. And then lastly, I have auditing. So you're really capturing a moment in time, exactly what your facility looks like at a specific moment. So if you do a lot of prep to make sure that everything looks exactly the way it's supposed to, you can use this to refer to as like your ideal 5S area of a space. But if it's not, then you can use it as an example of like highlighting all the things in the space that could be improved, because it'll really stick out when you've got an exact representation of the space that you have. Or same thing goes with like safety audits, and I mean, really the sky's the limit. So these are our folks that really make it happen. So you probably know the person in your area or your regional manager in your location. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your regional manager, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I hope that you guys are interested in bringing in IES to help do these scans with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Casey.